We're gonna get the meeting started here at 6:32. All right, if you please join me in singing Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, starting off with the roll call.
Tom Frick.
Here.
Dan Enright is absent. Ryan Lisick.
Here.
Don Oliphant.
Here.
Tom Stevens.
Here.
Bob Carnahan.
Here.
And Tammy Gilbert here.
All right, moving into the minutes.
Let's reflect
Yes,
that Jill and Rick are here with us too.
All right. We have Rick Eberly and Jill Murr as well. All right, and reviewing the minutes from October 27th, 2020. May I receive a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion that we approve the minutes.
All right, and I second.
Tom Frick.
Yes.
Ryan Lisick.
Yes. All right, jumping into old business is Chuck Becker, 7513 West 136th Avenue. Mr. Becker, are you online?
I don't believe so.
All right.
I had spoken to him the week before our previous meeting was supposed to be, and I told him he didn't need to be here. So I can give a brief update, kind of where this one's going. Hot off the presses, there was some stuff included in your packet, and then some additions that I brought with me today. The two plats that you can see, I think, are from the 60s and 70s. Woodland Shores has been replatted several different times to re-subdivide some really old outlots. So if you actually see the JS behind you, Woodland Shores edition, there's resubs of specific lots. There's resubs of parts of original outlots. This original subdivision is kind of how it existed north of 136, all these little tiny square lots that extend back into outlots, and then they were re-subdivided over the years into several different plats. So that was a fun process, trying to figure out what easements we potentially have back there. The two subdivision plats you have in your packet are this Woodland Shores Edition resub of part outlots I, and it's supposed to be H, and then Woodland Shores Edition resub lots 5, 6, 7, and 10. The outlot I and H one actually does show a 15-foot wide drainage utility easement between lots 19 and 20, which is where that existing 10-inch PVC pipe kind of runs. So it's on the left side of this one highlighted. And then the Woodland Shores Edition resub 5, 6, 7, and 10 shows a 12 and a half foot easement all the way from essentially Mr. Becker's parcel, which is this one, all the way to the east on lot 10. So that essentially encompasses most of the storm sewer that's out there now. I'll get into the plans that I just handed out, but essentially we need to install an entirely new system to make it, worth anything. I think we talked about the last couple of meetings that the existing system under 136 place is an 18-inch pipe and it's back pitched, there's bellies in it. And then the system that extends back into the rear yards is anywhere from a 10-inch PVC into a series of really old 4-inch clay tiles, which we're not 100% sure where even they're at yet. Because we'll eventually have to remove them when we take this project on. So what I put before you now is essentially a plan to replace that system. It's basically in a similar alignment, starting in the town. Well, this is Woodland Shores Property Owners Association, and then the existing right of way actually extends in this little kind of L boot, and that is the existing outfall for the system now. So it would take the same path, come up here, turn north, and then basically we would utilize an existing inlet here, another existing We essentially would be turning here, getting rid of that 10-inch PVC pipe and heading north with an 18. And then it would split out to the east, pick up this low area over here, and then it would have to split west at Chuck's southeast corner, head up, and then pick up drainage in the low spot on 136. So it's a substantial system.
Do we got access to all these, where these lines are gonna go?
The only one we don't have access to would be the common lot line, which would be Chuck's eastern lot line, which would be on the east side of this highlighted point to get back up to 136 to pick up that low spot. From everything else from we can tell, we have a 12.5-foot easement down the mid lot lines there, and then we have a 15-foot splitting 19 and 20, and then we get into public right away. And then we likely would need an easement through Woodland Shores, unless there's something tied to this deed of an existing easement that I'm not aware of. But it's a substantial system, so we don't get into exact numbers at meetings because this may be a bid out project, but the estimated cost, we'll say it's between $200,000 and $300,000.
Now, the looks of this, it looks like you're redirecting some of the pipe, right?
So
Compared to where it is.
a majority of the new system would be on a similar alignment. Right
But
now,
not at exactly where it is now.
not exactly, but pretty close. So all the existing pipe would come out. We wouldn't abandon anything in place. We would, like I said, there's an existing lateral at this kind of west-north turn that we would utilize in this low spot of 136 place, but really everything else is going to come out. As we get into the rear yards back in here, we would have to locate that existing 4-inch tile. Sometimes weird stuff's tied into it. Sometimes perimeter drains are tied into stuff like that, and we don't want to rip it out if some of that stuff is reliant on it. From what Chuck's told us, there's maybe even 2 different lines back there that are tied to people's sumps. It's something we need to locate before we do anything. And it's obviously not in any plans that we have. It was likely put in probably as part of the original subdivision back in the 60s. So, I mean, we've recommended that Public Works goes out in there and smokes it, but I don't know if you guys have done that or not, but
Sewer department hasn't had a chance to yet.
yeah. So if the project was taken on, we'd certainly have to figure out what exactly is out in those rear yards. Because it would have to come out, or some of that infrastructure have to be tied in. I think Chuck has mentioned that some of that 4-inch lines may actually even go under his house.
Yeah, they do. What he's
So
told me in the past.
there's going to be some method and some thought put to abandoning that system before it's just cut off. You can cause some problems that you probably don't want to cause. So that kind of goes hand in hand with any kind of new system. Due to the cost amount of that, it's larger than this board normally handles. This really wouldn't be tied to a road project per se. 136 Place was redone 8-9 years ago, maybe more than that. Probably 07 to 08. I think it was one of the first capital improvement plans way back then when. So the road itself's in good condition. 136 Ave just got repaved last year. Doesn't have curbs, and that may be part of the project to kind of corral that low spot on 136, but right now it's not shown as such. So it's a big project. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
So that'll have to probably go to the town council for approval.
Likely, but it's a policy decision about, what monies would pay for it, what's available, and when it would go. So typically when we have projects of that size, it's pushed into, a council decision. We had a similar one up on 130, which one was that? 140th. That we essentially tabled because it's a large project on 40th Place. So.
Now Randy keeps telling me we got a lot of money in the stormwater.
Well, that's what I was gonna bring up, Bob, is, and I meant to look at it before we came in today, but I don't know what the balance is in the
Yeah, I thought it was over.
I thought it was something like $1.1 million.
It could be as far as cash goes, but currently there's some projects that are coming in with the road projects and stuff we did that may have outstanding encumbrances tied to that, those funds.
Okay.
So we would have to double check that.
Because I can tell you from the conversations I've had, just in the brief time I've been here, that the council, I think it's fair to say that the council looking for the storm board to take on and make their own decisions, take on projects like this and make their own decisions based on the monies that it has available to it in the user fee.
Okay.
And so we'd have to check on that and see how much of those funds are maybe committed. Also, I just learned this in the last couple of days, but when the user fee was adopted, there was and I hope I use the right terminology, but there was essentially a permanent credit established for commercial properties. In other words, they were paying 20% less than.
That was when the recent increase went through. So 2-3 years ago, maybe now?
Right. So, yes, in late 17, I think
Yep.
it was down.
That's where it doubled.
Right. So, but what we found out fairly recently is that the water and sanitary utilities have been funding that 20% credit.
Okay.
Making the stormwater board whole. So in other words, you're getting your $10 ERU for both commercial and residential properties.
Okay.
But it's being paid out of the other two utilities. Stormwater is going to wind up having to pay that money back to those utilities. And our financial advisor, Sue Hayes, is looking at those numbers to see what those are going to be.
Okay. Why was that necessary, I guess?
Well, it's a software glitch from what I'm told, and Cliff is gonna work with the software company. But nobody knew this was happening until about July of this year. So it went for over 2 years, 2 years and a fraction where this was occurring. So your revenues stormboard's revenues are artificially inflated. The other two bodies, utilities, have been
Artificially low.
artificially lowered, so there's gonna have to be an accounting of that and a paying back of that, and then a correction of it going forward. So the commercial properties are just charged at that $8 per ERU rate, and residential properties are charged at the 10.
Full. Yep.
So that's a consideration too,
Yeah.
in looking at available funds for any projects the storm board has like this. But it'd be my impression that the council's looking to you folks to make your decisions on your projects and spend the stormwater user fee monies to get these done.
Then I think at a staff level, it may be prudent to establish a solid budget starting for 21
I agree.
and just to see what's available, see which projects are in the pipeline. We have some that are, have been earmarked in the past that have been waiting. So,
Yeah, because there was another one I think Jill or Tim told me about, that's a rear yard drainage prop.
Carrie,
Yeah, where the rear yard infrastructure
Collapsed.
and collapsed.
it's collapsed.
Yeah.
That's
And
the next
that's
item.
That's $250,000 project, 300,000, something like that.
We need to figure out the length of it. But yeah, that won't be
Yeah.
cheap.
So you've got some major projects to consider with the stormwater fees, but we can take a
So we've
look at.
got Highlands, the Highland subdivision paving project. We also have 129th Avenue, which we were just awarded community crossing funds today.
Today.
That has a stormwater component to it. Also, the council and street committee updating the paving master plan for the projects throughout the community. Many of those will have storm infrastructure projects, such as one of the larger ones, I think Sherman Street's included with one of those projects. So those are projects you've had in the pipeline that we know are part of a bigger infrastructure project. So we have to look at those funds too, to make sure that we're not, that we have a good list of projects and overextending ourselves.
Is Vermillion and 126th in there?
They will be. Vermillion's being surveyed now. We should have that in the next 2 weeks or so, I hope. So that'll be part of Parish is another one that'll have a stormwater component next year from 133rd to 137th and may probably early, actually still this year, portions of it, the phase one area. So no, there are several projects that are scoped to go next year that certainly have a stormwater component to them.
Yeah, when Ian Nicolini was here, he told me, he says, Bob, we just got enough money, we're gonna pave that road, but it's a Band-Aid and it'll fall apart, that it wouldn't last long.
126, you mean?
No,
or no.
Vermillion and 100, some people call it 126th and some call it Vermillion, so I mentioned both
One on
names.
the south side of Sergio's property?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that kind of contributes and goes into the lake.
Yeah, so we'll have to look at all those projects that are already due to go next year and see how much is gonna come out of that from that fund and figure it out. So it's there. I mean, the project's up to a pretty reasonable level of certainty that we know a pretty good number on how much it's gonna cost for this one specifically. The other ones are pretty much at 100%. So we can scope those out pretty easily.
And we don't anticipate a problem getting an easement for Mr. Becker, right? I assume.
I highly doubt it. I would hope not.
Yeah, I will. I agree with you.
I would hope not.
Can this project be done in any phases? How it tees, and heads to the west, is there,
Maybe. I mean, your logical break point would be kind of before it gets into the road here. So, because pretty much everything outside of that would be public right of way except potentially the POA property at the outfall. Depending on how the existing and proposed inverts matched here, they're going to be pretty close because there's very little cover here. This is the lowest cover spot in the entire system, just how the topo works out. So, I mean, you certainly could do that part up front and really only need clarification from the POA you have access. And then, I mean, even though we have easements back here, there's a lot of stuff in the way. Trees, utilities,
1960s.
likely fence lines, just a lot of nuances that, we have legal authority to take down. But it's a lot of public notification and just coordination with the homeowners.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, so you could break it, but it would just be the crux of the issue is the upstream part of it. So that is the drainage issue. So doing the first part, yes, it gets it in, but it's not really doing anything to help the issue at whole. So, but yes, you could break it if you had to.
And using the euphemism Band-Aid, it's an antiquated system and Mr. Becker's had nothing but Band-Aids put on this for decades. The one thing I do want to bring up is what's the return on investment? What's the property worth
That's
at the
another,
end of the day?
it's another clarification. We've had that issue on other ones. They're spending X amount of money when the affected parcel is only worth Y. So I know the town's not in the business of potentially purchasing homes and demolishing them and maintaining it as green space, but it's something that has to be discussed. It just does. The cost difference and balance and benefit, it's just all things that need to be talked about. I mean, 136, it's a sag point there. It should have had drainage, for years when it was constructed. It just doesn't. So it's not that it only benefits Mr. Becker, but
Right.
it's a system that should have been put in right from the start. But
And why
The
they
town-
put drains underneath his house, I have no idea.
the town was, this subdivision, I think was recorded before the town was even incorporated. So, the ordinances back then and requirements were very little. So, and this is not the first site like this in town. There's many instances like this.
Yeah.
And we kind of try to catch our tail from stuff that was before the town. So it's not new. It's not any different. It's unfortunate, but it's something we have to deal with.
What's the property appraised for?
But,
I mean,
you can look at the valuation and tax record.
Right.
It's likely less than what the
Yeah.
project is valued at now. I'm pretty confident about that.
Okay.
I mean, this system gets you a 10-year level capacity, probably a little bit more than that. It's just, that's all we can really get. I don't think you want to go more expensive than that. Well, obviously your prices escalate and we just don't have cover for it. You have to go dual barrel or ellipticals and then you really start to escalate costs. So
You're thinking buying Chuck's house and using it retention?
or just keeping it as, I mean, keeping it as green space. He's clearly the lowest person. I know his neighbor to the west has had issues according to him. They haven't come in and said anything about it, but based on the contours, I imagine they have not quite as severe issues, but I imagine they have some issues. So, I mean, yeah, he's the pipes are under his house. He's at a low spot. He's got a couple negatives against him. I mean, I
know that he
know
doesn't live there. He's renting it out.
he's renting it out, but I mean,
And
I
I don't
think he
wanna-
would sell it if he could.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not out of the realm of discussion, I don't think.
So
But-
as far as a balance or some forensic accounting is gonna take place, when's that date gonna come to fruition? To see what's in the stormwater coffers, what's already programmed and so forth. That's not gonna happen till end of Q1.
Well,
We can bring back some preliminary numbers in January,
January.
projects we know that are on the books.
Okay.
yeah, we've got a good idea of what's going next year already.
No
So,
question.
We
Yeah,
got the remainder of Woody Cedar Creek.
yeah, it's another one that's been added within the last month and a half, so. I mean, there's
We can put a list together,
Okay.
Yeah.
get you a ballpark.
Because I think that would be the best way to go. Give different options to Mr. Becker, maybe discuss this in further. And just kind of compare the different options that are available.
Sure.
Is that
Yeah, I didn't realize until you said that, Ryan, that it appears to only be benefiting one property. This is not for the benefit of the whole line that this, of property owners that this would run through.
when you talk about specifically the structure, probably. But I imagine this entire rear line doesn't drain well, just because people aren't discussing it. But yeah, it's,
I mean, if it's a project that benefits all those homes that you've identified there, Don, from Mr. Becker's lot all the way to the east, well, that's a different story.
yeah, it's, I mean, it's levels of benefit, I guess you might call it that. I mean, we've only heard from Mr. Becker. We haven't heard from anybody else in the neighborhood. It's not saying they don't have issues and they're just not coming forward. I mean, we'd be draining I mean, I think we discussed, there's almost 17 acres or something
Yeah,
to this system. It's a pretty large, it essentially encompasses this entire neighborhood in some form or fashion. His house is definitely in a pit, where a lot of the other ones are more on crowns. So,
Right.
but no, I mean, for only one person to be speaking up about it and spending
That kind of money.
several six figures, it's expensive. And I think other alternatives should be at least considered.
Okay.
And Don, I spoke to the resident, probably 4 houses to the east of him, when we were out there checking. He said ever since we originally fixed that her and her neighbor to the east, which essentially has the main drain, they're fine.
Okay.
She said there was a little bit here and there, but nothing that a little swale couldn't have done. But she was not complaining. She told me that a couple other residents really are not really complaining about it because when it was refixed, it seemed to help a lot better.
Okay.
I mean, the pipe is too small. We already know that.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, what's the severity of the flooding issue? Is it relegated to one house? Is it more systemic and neighborhood wide? Those are all things that need to be considered. This is not a cheap project. It's not just a simple.
Is that existing pipe? It's not blocking it, right? Is the water still flows through it?
No, you guys checked it, right? It was clean.
Yeah, I mean, we could go back and set it out again, now the leaves are gone.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it looked okay. But I mean, we found the basin behind his house, and there's 6 pipes coming into it. And then there's another pipe that's coming out of the ground from nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so reconvene on that in January.
Yep.
Getting on to Carey Street, the Thierry property and the Costello property. 148.
This is the Lindsway parcels that we were just discussing. So back when Lindsway was constructed, just to bring everybody back up to speed, in 2006, 7, and 8, they installed a 36-inch HDPE in the rear yards of essentially 149th all the way up to 147th. Kind of what we think happened is when it was installed, I think it's only a single wall HDPE pipe, so it's not very strong. I don't think it was properly vetted prior to heavy equipment driving over it. So I think it's actually been snapped for years. It's just starting to cause sinkholes around the structures and I think on some of the main lines. So the only thing we need to really fix it is just identify exactly from what manhole to manhole that it's essentially beyond repair and replace it. I think we have a 30-foot easement in the rear yards there. It would be a problem getting through fence lines again, but we have access.
Have we televised the line, or what are we doing?
they can only get so far in, and
Yeah.
And it's flat.
I don't know exactly how many feet they went in, but yeah, it's flat. They can't get in from the other side either. So,
Aren't we outside the fence line with those on Lindsay?
No,
so.
I think the fence lines go all the way back. Yeah,
Yeah,
some are,
they're
some aren't.
weird, because some of them are, and then some of them are like right next to the fence post, and then other ones are kind of farther back into more towards like the field.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have to get exact locations of it. I have a feeling it's that entire block, if not more, which is several hundred feet.
And that's a 36-inch, you said?
36-inch HDPE. I'm not sure how it got put in. We didn't allow HDPE back then. We just added it to the ordinance like 5-6 years ago. So I'm not even sure how it got installed. But yeah, so I mean, do you guys have an idea about exact limits? Or do we just need to start popping manholes?
Tony you probably have,
Okay.
Tony you probably
I mean, I can give him the original plans. You just want to mark them, and then we can go off of that.
Yeah, because I know they still have they should still have the video.
The video? Okay. I'll pass those on, and if we can at least mark them up, we can get an idea about what we have to do, and then we can figure out how many fence lines we either have to have the homeowners take down, or we'll take them down. And
Because I asked
It'd
Frank
be a
if he
spring
could go
project.
in through the other way, closer to like where the park's supposed to be, and he said that it wouldn't, the camera wouldn't fit through there enough to get all the way to where the spot was, so.
Many of the property owners there too, who are having the issue, are aware that their fence will need to come down.
Okay.
We just need to give them a timeline.
so, I mean, from a design standpoint, really easy, but yeah, we just need those limits, and then we'll put something together.
And we'll probably need, in the future, not allow these people to put these fences on their easements.
Difficult to enforce.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
What we should be requiring is a sign off from the property owner acknowledging that if they're fencing in an easement, they have to, at their own expense,
Remove.
remove the fences if we or any other utility needs to get in there and do any work.
Yeah.
That's pretty common.
Because Jill, do they have fence permits for building department? We do, don't we? We need to revise the permit.
Yeah, it's just it's a simple form that they sign acknowledging that when they're taking out the fence permit, that they're fencing in an easement.
Yep.
At their own risk.
So that should cover it. At least they can go back to that document and say, should have known about this. So I'm sure many would be surprised. So so yeah, once we get those limits, I'll forward it on to you.
Okay.
And then if Tony wants to mark it up,
Yeah.
figure it out.
So that could possibly be a spring project.
Potentially, if we can get in there before it starts raining, that'd be ideal. I mean, just the size of the pipe, we're obviously gonna have to do it when it's dry. I don't know how much it actually collects. It's for an offsite bypass. That was the original design of it. So it's essentially collecting the farm field and bypassing it up into the creek. So yeah, it would be ideal to get to it before spring rains start.
Does it pick up any field tile or no? Directly, I mean, tied into the 36?
I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. I wouldn't, I'm sure there is some right there, but I would be surprised if it was tied into it. I mean, you guys have access to the manholes. You see anything coming into them? Yeah. I don't know if those houses have, well, some do have basements. We know that. So who knows? We just made a drain tile survey part of the ordinance in 15. So for these exact reasons.
Okay. Moving on to update items, 137th and Lowerman.
Right. I'm just going to give updates to everything since Rick's kind of getting the gist of a lot of these. This one's been on stormwater agenda for a long time. It's essentially a ditch line along 137th and even along Lowerman that essentially meets at the intersection of Southwood Corner, and there is no outlet. So there's been no real good solutions. Years ago, oh geez, it's hard to believe it, part 2+ years ago, we had an agreement with Cedar Lake Ministry to run a pipe all the way out to the lake. It's a $110,000 estimate on it. Then they paved all their roads and didn't tell anybody. So that kind of, we would have had to rip the roads up before. So that kind of eliminated that. So over the last couple of months, we've been putting together an update to kind of the capital improvement subdivision master plan is what we're terming it. Noble Oaks was included in that, which is this large subdivision down here. That's only part of it. It keeps extending all the way down to about 142nd. So we repaved this section this year. It's kind of a, you know, excuse the term, Band-Aid. Until we can get the larger projects off the ground with actually installing stormwater infrastructure. As part of that, we included Birch Street. It's kind of one of the only roads around here outside of the subdivision that also isn't done. So
That goes from 137th over to Lowerman.
Yep. And so we included that as part of the Noble Oaks, even though it's not technically part of the subdivision. It's just kind of part of that area. So as part of that, Noble Oaks and another one of the 7 areas in that plan have been taken to 30%-ish plans, mainly because we've had problems with NIPSCO over the last couple of years about getting stuff moved in a timely fashion. So the thought was to get them going on some of their gas main relocations, which seem to be every time we do a subdivision project. So as part of that, we did Birch Street. And Birch Street, we essentially have a new storm sewer system that comes from 137th all the way down to Sleepy Hollow. And that would take in this ditch line and solve this problem once and for all. So there's been some discussion. The benefit of Birch, it's a standalone project while included as part of Noble Oaks. It's a standalone system. It can be constructed on its own at any time. So that would solve this problem once and for all. It would take this corner into its system.
You got the depths for it.
We got the depths for it. So, I mean, the ditch line's actually well defined. It just doesn't drain down. It has to infiltrate. So it doesn't necessarily impact the structures in the areas or even the roadway. It gets into yards and it's a nuisance more than anything. There's not a large tributary area to it even. It just has nowhere to go. So that's that one, and that could also be considered as a next year project, but it's also partially related to street committee as well. Probably more so on street committee's agenda than storm board, but it's tied into it kind of.
We have a standalone cost on that too, right?
I mean, it's something we can break out really easily. I mean, it's part of the Noble Oaks cost estimate, but it's something we can break out pretty easily. So that would be the intended solution for that one. I mean, that one's been on this board off and on for a long time. So you can see the road, the contours, it's got steady grade all the way down. And right now that's a mishmash of driveway culverts and swale lines.
Okay.
So that's that. And the master plan, I think I'm supposed to have a draft copy from my designer shoot this month, so kind of got pushed off with how busy we're in the field this year. So
All right,
that's that update. The next one kind of ties to that as well. It's also part of the master plan.
and that's the Via Labella and Pam and Mark Altop on Sherman Street.
Yeah, so this is the other subdivision that also got brought up to 20-30% plans. This one's got a little more history to it. Essentially, this vacant lot was allowed to construct maybe 2-3 years ago. And as you can tell, all the drainage from this house went north. Well, when that house was built, we've had a history of issues with pre-platted subdivisions that don't have proper infrastructure. This is one of them. Essentially, he mounted his house up and now it ponds water on this lot 33, which is the Altop's property right here.
And then the people to the north of the new house also get ponding in their yard.
Yeah,
At
sort
least that's
of.
what she told me.
That's, yeah, the Ladella is actually on the north side of the new home.
Right.
Where contours actually show water normally went through her yard to the north. So in my opinion on that particular issue, not a lot has changed. Obviously, a new house creates more runoff, but the directional of runoff hasn't really changed.
Rick, kind of what's happened out there, they built a new house. And I guess our codes want it elevated for a new house. And so the house to the south and the house to the north are experiencing water that they never experienced before.
We require the new builds to be 18 inches above curb line.
I think it's 16, but yes.
Yeah,
There's not really curb line out there, but edge of pavement probably.
educated.
Yeah. So, I mean, that causes an issue when there's really no stormwater infrastructure out there at all. I mean, even the contours show it going north. I would argue that was probably more of a bowl before the house was built. So kind of pushed the bowl to the south. Now it's got nowhere to go. Tried to remedy it by putting like a 4-inch tile through his rear yard. That wasn't going to work. So
No infrastructure in the street, you're saying?
Nope. no, so this has been on the agenda for about a year and a half now. We did come up with alternatives to send it north, to send it south as well. But as we started putting in, so this entire subdivision is the other one, which actually it goes all the way. They're kind of mini subdivisions. It's this entire block over here. That's all one subdivision in the master plan. And they're almost all one-way streets. And Sherman and Rockland over here, they're essentially, singular systems that could be like Birch Street constructed on their own. Because Sherman's kind of crowned where some of it runs north, some of it runs south. So when we reconstruct the road and put in curbs and storm sewer, you could address this problem at the same time. We would obviously need a easement to get back into the low spot on the Altop parcel to pick it up, but we could take it into any system we constructed. So
you mentioned north and south. I thought we were geared more towards the south.
we are geared toward the south. And there's a finite point with the road profile, with it being high. Some of it has to go north, but that's away from this issue. But yes, the storm sewer system would outlet into this low area into a Woods of Cedar Creek parallel system, which is essentially here, this low spot right here. And then that goes into a storm sewer system that's dedicated and it drops right down into Cedar Creek. So we have a decent outfall for it. I think we hesitated in doing a fix for one lot again. That's $100,000 when you could take it into a much larger system that's benefiting the entire street. So that's why it's this has lagged a little bit as we kind of prepare those plans. And like I said, similar to Birch Street, it's a singular system. You could do this on its own. Whereas if you go east into this neighborhood, the systems start they're more total systems, if you want to call it that, because they all kind of drain through each other and have one singular outfall. So those systems are much larger. You can't just build an upstream part of it, you have to build the entire thing. Whereas it's just
And
one
a lot
stream.
of this drains to 141st, where when we get heavy rains, 141st is flooded so bad traffic can't even get through it.
Well, yeah, that low spot's part of, not to get too much off topic, but that's
Yeah,
this
well, I
area
just-
here.
Kind of,
Yeah. So that,
giving
this,
a little bit of history, so
Yeah,
we're
Wheeler.
aware of that.
so as part of everything, this road will be brought up and appropriate cross culverts will be installed and that'll eliminate a lot of that. But that's part of the overall subdivision plan, but that would be part of it. So, same thing, part of it.
So you're gonna bring something back, or,
I mean, this one and the other one will be kind of addressed in that big plan, which I hope will be finalized probably by January. Slowed it a little bit.
Okay, part of the master plan. Moving on to Martin Ryan, 8320 Raven Way. Has there been any communication from him at all?
I don't think so. He came in 6 months ago, probably now.
We did what he wanted
Yeah,
done.
it's done.
We just checked it last time it rained. I guess if you want all that,
It hasn't rained that hard yet to really test it.
it looks the same, so.
Rick, this is just north of Lanika, actually. This is Mr. Ryan here. Essentially, there's a 12-inch pipe that comes under this large, under the street and kind of through this ravine. He gets a bunch of debris into it. It's essentially a 12-inch pipe into a 48-inch, 60-inch structure that's graded. There's no lid on it. It's just essentially a rebar, contraption on top of it. We slapped a lid on it and put a high capacity beehive on it to see if that helps. But I think the ultimate thing is that 12 inches is undersized. The corresponding issue with that is this neighborhood is historical little volume stormwater wise and has substantial flooding issues downstream. So the thought is to see if this works for debris to keep ponding away from his house and see how it goes during some of the spring rains, because I don't want to open it up because you're just pushing a bigger issue downstream then at that point. So the recommendation's been completed. We're just kind of waiting for a tester.
so we just gotta continue with this.
Yeah, let's keep it as an update item. I mean, you can probably move it to Public Works. I mean, they did it, so we'll keep an eye on it as March and April roll around and start getting some larger rainfall events to really see how it goes. How was the debris last time you checked?
Didn't look bad, really.
Okay.
I mean, there's more weeds and boulders that are growing around,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's actually kind of helping catch the stuff from going down into that.
Into the pipe.
other pipe.
Okay.
You said that's a 12-inch?
I think it's a 12-inch pipe.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we can move that to public works projects for next time. Getting into public works projects, we have Jacob Veman, 9208 West 142nd Place.
So this plan was finalized at last meeting. We have since completed a temporary easement document to town staff for town attorney to review it. Essentially a blanket easement on his parcel to gain access to install that inlet in the rear yard and bring it out to the system at 142nd Place. So pending legal review, and that's good to go, we would need Mr. Veman's signature completed. So that would be a spring project.
Have we got anything back from Dave on that?
If not, I just sent it probably a week or so ago, week and a half.
Okay.
Okay. Now moving on over to the Albanos at 12836 Heth Street. Has there been any correspondence? Was Tim able to get out there? I know that
I
Comment.
called him and texted him today and he never got back to me. He was supposed to look at it 2 weeks ago. I don't know if he's done it or not. I kind of told him,
Who's that, Tim?
Tim, I've kind of told him what our theory is. We've been out there and looked at it, and I would say there's a lot worse rear yard drainage issues than this one. Their lawn is immaculate. I would hate to touch it, and you can even see by the contours and by the visual, just by the eye out there, it's got fall on it. I mean, it's got close to a foot of pitch from south line to north line. And then the other things that complicate it is that his north neighbor, well, there's a bunch of utilities out there. We know that from doing other rear yard projects to the north, and they're not deep. And they're pretty much centered right on the swale. The north property owner has he took it upon himself years ago to install essentially a rock infiltration trench, if you want to call that, to the inlet on his north limit up here. So if we actually installed a pipe from the inlet up here, we have an easement. We would have to run through his entire rock area, get around a giant transformer at the Albano's northwest corner, and then we rip up her pristine yard, in my opinion. We were out there, and it's lush. And if we run a pipe through there, it's never going to be the same. So, I mean, there's been some discussion. Tim was going to go look at it and maybe talk to the Albanos a little bit about what's actually going on out there. I don't know if there's just small bellies out there, or they were unaware that there would be water back there on occasion, or it's taking long to drain down, or what. But the vacant lot to the south has also recently gone to construction, so there will be another sump pump outlet back there
yeah, that should be
contributing to it.
finished soon.
Yeah, I think it's got to be close to finished.
But the issue was there is a belly out there. There's been different times with the animals that are on the property and Mr. Albano slipping and sliding back there, but it does belly up back there. And I've reiterated to her that going through this whole process and going through the utilities and connecting to existing infrastructure would make things worse at some conjuncture, if not even make things better.
I mean, I would argue if it's just small bellies, it's not advisable to install 200 plus feet of storm sewer. That doesn't address a belly. If we have large, low areas potentially, then yes, with no outfall. But I don't want to make it the board's agenda to be fixing tiny bellies in rear yards of every lot.
That's a grading issue.
It's a grading issue.
That's exactly what it is. It's a grading issue, and that's what I had said to her. Absolutely.
That's just a grading issue.
Yeah. Like they don't want to get involved in it because trying to find minor bellies all.
How old is the property, would you say, the home?
Was it built in 2012, 2015? They bought it in 2017, I believe.
Yeah. So this is a 13 aerial. It's probably built right before this. It looks like they got some blanket back there. So yeah, probably 12. I remember when she initially came in, and she hasn't been in it since the first time, I think. She brought it to our attention.
They are
They're retired.
They're retired, and they're a at-risk population.
Yeah, I think the way she termed it is that when they bought this house, they thought there would essentially be almost like a no maintenance house. So I think they were kind of perturbed that they had this issue. I mean, there's plenty of fall away from the house. I mean, it drops quite a bit. It's 2+ feet from the low station grade back to that swale line.
Yeah, that's the only house on the block that's like that. All the other ones, they're more leveled out as you go.
Yeah, this one, it falls pretty hard away from the house.
Because we walked down that whole block, and hers is really the only house that has it, other than her neighbor that took care of it on his own, but all the rest of them are just flat. And then there's basins maybe every 5th house. And they're not even, there's nothing coming towards 129th is all going the opposite way, all going north.
So there's pitch from the back of the house to the back lot line, and there's pitch from south to north.
It sure looks that way.
Oh, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a V, you go into her yard, it's V down and up where it goes right to his house.
It's like a
He
half.
told me that he did that because her house was flooding his yard. So he took it on his responsibility to do it on his own.
I mean, we honestly have worse issues in this specific subdivision. than
He's
this.
not blocking her flow.
No, there is a fence there, but there's clearance underneath it. No, I would think he did absolutely nothing to harm it. If anything, help it.
Well, between Jill and I, we'll ask Tim tomorrow if he's had a chance to go out and see that.
Yeah.
Report back to the board.
All right, Mr. Denick, 10813 West 134th Place.
Rick, I think you got some
Yeah,
updates on this
Mr.
one?
Deenick, and he's
He's
here with
here.
us this evening. I had a chance to go out and meet with Mr. Deenick, I think the first week or so that I was here. And there is a high spot in the swale that parallels his house. And there's a split rail fence there that has been moved right now, temporarily moved. There's a split rail fence on the corner of that property, lot 7.
Yep.
And then there's a row of small shrubs immediately south of that on lot 6. And it's created a little bit of a high spot in that swale, that north-south swale that drains from north to south. And there's a high spot there that's causing the water to divert around the fence and go into, right there where Don
Town parcel.
has the cursor. And it circles back into the swale and continues on down to its outlet. But it goes outside of the 30-foot drainage and detention easement that's back there that runs north and south. Mr. Deenick, and he can speak for himself in a moment, but he wanted to do a correction on his ditch that runs east-west, and take it into this 30-foot easement. But he knew if he did that, he was gonna cause water to pond on his neighbor's property that can't get immediately to the south to its outlet. So to his credit, he didn't want to fix his ditch and transfer his problem to his neighbors until the problem got fixed on the neighbor's property. So we sent the letter out just the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, asked the one property owner to move his fence, the other property owner to get rid of the small row of shrubs so that we could send Public Works out there and regrade that to its original intended line, so it sort of water drains from north to south as intended. And they've both done that, and Mr. Deenick can report to us tonight. He just told me tonight that the fence has been moved, and I think the shrubs have been moved as well. No problem with either of those property owners. They were very cooperative. So it's just a matter of, I want us to get in there when I don't want to go back there and tear it up in a
Right.
sloppy condition. I want it to be the right weather conditions for us to get back there and do it. But it's a pretty simple, I think, a real simple fix that can be done in very short order by Public Works.
Just
And-
dip it down with a skid steer.
yeah, and
Blade it back.
actually, Tim said in any case, Public Works has been advised that this needs to be done as soon as weather permits and as soon as these I'll call them obstructions have been removed, and the obstructions have been removed.
Okay.
And the one gentleman told me, Mark, that he would replant those shrubs somewhere else. He'd get them out of that ditch line and just plant them somewhere else on his property. The split rail fence there doesn't cause any problem.
No.
Where it's at, so. It's just a simple thing for Public Works to get out there and do, or they might just hire a contractor to get out there and do it quickly. I don't know. Depends on their.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm glad that Mark was able to confirm for me, because I had gotten a return phone call from the gentleman with the fence saying that he was not physically able to move the fence, but both Mr. Deenick and the neighbor, Mr. Knott, had both offered it to me, said to me that they would help the neighbor move the split rail fence if necessary. And Mark said he didn't do it, so maybe Mr. Knott actually helped move the fence, but it is moved and ready for the work to be done.
I think Norbert's older, right?
Yeah, Yeah, that was him. He
Yep.
left me a voicemail message that he couldn't get it done. So it's been moved and it's ready to be done. Now that we know that those have been moved. And as soon as we can get out there.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Glad to hear it. Thank you for being patient, Mr. Tunick. And did you have any comments or anything on the record?
No, I was just gonna give an update that the items have been moved, that's all.
Okay,
Just want to thank you for your help.
okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, thank you. All right. There's gonna be a update item for the Stormwater Board meeting to possibly be moved to the second Tuesday of the month. And that'll be on the docket to discuss further. Something weird happened today. Tom Stevens was smiling and he was talking about retirement.
I'm
And that
not
was-
retiring.
You're not retiring. Okay, he's not retiring, but thank you very much and thank you for your service for
We're
Tom
just gonna
Searle.
break down in Texas.
Okay,
No, I'm just not gonna be
Okay.
doing the drain board meeting.
okay. But any who have a great holiday season and we'll see you next year.